Okay. How's it going
Hello.
today, Jack?
It's going well. How are you, Carter?
Not bad, not bad. So we can just dive right into things here. Um, so we are in the process of for our audience that's listening, we're in the process of creating an organization called Forefront that is largely going to be used to facilitate discussions around intactivism and also be a sort of debate arena for voices within intactivism to come into this environment and share their perspective on intactivism and circumcision and the state of how things are going right now for our movement, and also the opportunity to inject in new ideas and observations that they've had, even if they're very controversial or even offensive. To a limit, we want to facilitate that sort of conversation within this community, within this organization or group that we're starting here. Do you have anything that you want to add on top of that, Jack?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think part of the reason for the mission here, right, is at least I can only speak for myself, but like I kind of want to amplify, I guess you could say the voices of the victims, or at least the voices of the people that are on our side. And I also kind of want to make it topical. And I think this kind of maybe part of what you were saying, Carter, is like I want this to both be about like the intactivism circumcision issue, and maybe also, like you said, sometimes about other topics that are controversial. And I think that generally just brings in more people and makes the discussion more topical and plays to people's prior thoughts and feelings.
Absolutely. Yeah. Could you expand a little more on what you mean by topical? Like on the surf or
I guess I just mean like a topic that more people are talking about, more
oh,
people
okay,
are
in
not.
that sense, topical. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Good insight. All right. So for our organization, I think we're going to have some short-term goals and some long-term goals. And I think the immediate short-term goals for us are probably going to revolve around building of a community and a network of like-minded individuals that are pursuing a common goal, but potentially, we do have a lot of, we're going to present things that cause a lot that have a lot of friction within intactivism. And not that we're necessarily looking to rally all the dissenting voices together, but we want to create a community for people that maybe feel a little left out or don't feel like they align very well with the existing intactivist strategy and the existing intactivist networks. And in my mind, I see this at like, I want this community to exist. So that's partially why I'm pursuing it. And I don't see this community um, coming to fruition anytime soon without us getting involved and just making it happen. So that's really what's driving me to pursue this, is it's something that I want for myself and I think would have a lot of utility and community building opportunities for the men who, and I know there's a lot of men that feel similarly to us that are out there. I see it online a lot. I've had a lot of conversations with people. So for me, that's the immediate short-term goal, is getting people into our network, into our community who have similar or, potentially very different ideas than us, but overall they feel like they're not getting what they should be out of intactivism quite yet, or out of the activism around circumcision. Maybe intactivism isn't even the right way to put it, but the activism that exists around this atrocity, they're feeling left out from that right now, or like they don't have much of a voice, or their voice isn't welcome.
Yeah, that's interesting, Carter. So I guess can you expand more upon like for what reasons you think some people feel excluded and the ways in which you want like this organization to have them not feel excluded?
Yeah, yeah. And so for me, it's that, for I can speak on my own personal feelings and then maybe how I feel about the larger space as well. But for me personally, I'm really pursuing criminalization, and there's an element of discipline to that as well. And then there's an element of holding people accountable and not infantilizing who I've identified as perpetrators of this, including the parents, including the physicians, including any people who are even tangentially involved with this atrocity, and really beginning to change the language that we use. That's a major issue that I have in the intactivist spaces. Is to just be blunt and honest, I don't feel like it's accurate and portrays the depth of this issue and the atrocity that it is in a lot of instances. So I want to begin collectively coming to a consensus as this group, or as a large enough group of people, like, how do we feel about the parents? How do we feel about the physicians? And everyone's going to have their own independent perspective on this, but I think there's major opportunities in having a unified front and having a collective, um, or sharing your perspective as a collective. So saying, hey, a lot of intactivists think this way. Oh, but now there's this huge group of men that, feel this way about it. And getting our voice out there, and in numbers, I think we can have more of an impact. So if we bring our voice together as a collective, instead of just me going out there to all the intactivist groups saying, hey, I think things should evolve in this way. I think the way that things are being pursued right now is ineffective and also in some ways offensive to the victims of this. And whether I'm right or wrong, I want to it could significantly evolve over time, my perspective, but I want to get this conversation going because I feel like I'm totally alone. I mean, I spend hours a day literally talking to myself at times because I don't have anyone else to talk to. So I'm at the point where I'm actually having conversations with myself. And that, I think, becomes dangerous pretty quickly because through this back and forth with other human beings, your perspective can shift pretty quickly, even if it is, not in the sense that you just adopt what everyone else is saying, but that there is a very different process going on when you have a conversation with somebody else versus when you're your own internal monologue. Um, so I think I got kind of lost in the sauce there and touched on a lot of different things, but ultimately, I'm looking to, the short-term goal is, and everyone, who comes in this community is going to have a different short-term goal, but I want power. I want more power, and not necessarily exclusively for me as the individual, but for this viewpoint and for this perspective that I have. I want to be able to influence things in a more dramatic way than I can right now. And I think we can do that through a collective front is the honest truth of why I partially want to pursue this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned the power, because that's a lot of how I'm personally thinking about this as well. As in, like, a lot of the, I guess, the audience, like the people watching, or just generally like the victims of this, or the people that agree with us, I want to empower them, right? And
Mhm.
that's kind of the mindset that I'm going into this with, is and that's kind of hard to do, right? Because this is obviously like, I don't know what word you want to use, an atrocity, or this is obviously like something people struggle with personally to an extreme degree. And that's kind of what I want to change, at least in my own little small way here, is I kind of want to change people's association with this movement or being involved in this space. Because I think right now, what happens to a lot of people is they're personally struggling and they land here in this space, and there's not really any good on-ramps or good ways to get involved. And the ones that are require a large amount of personal sacrifice. It's like, oh, you should go like travel and protest in person wearing, an attire that some people might not be interested in wearing. It's just kind of like a big ask. All the ways to get involved today are big asks. So I kind of want to flip the question a little bit. I think the question today is a little bit like, what can you do for this movement? I kind of flip it as like, what can the movement do for you? And, like, I don't fully have the answer to that yet, but like one thing the movement can do for you is like empower you and like center your voice in this conversation. You are the authority. We're kind of the only ones that should be the authority on this because we're the only ones on the right side of this issue. And I think that's like a compelling narrative we can present to people, including everyone watching right now, is like, we kind of want to get you on the show or get you involved in whatever capacity you're comfortable. And like, we want to like center your voice. Like, we want to hear from you and we want to like distribute it out to other people. If you want, we're not asking that of you. We want to offer that to you.
Right. And I like the idea of just being open about our pursuits in some ways. I mean, we're looking to, I mean, partially socially engineer people and create a network of social engineers, psychological operations officers in our communities. Um, and I think psychological operations can go a lot of different ways. They can be inherently very problematic and negative, but you can also pursue them in a way that is advantageous for yourself and the community that you're in, and ultimately something that's very positive. And that's how I'm starting to the lens that I'm starting to see this through, because obviously we've encountered a lot of resistance on this subject matter, on this topic, and it does require a lot of higher level thinking and a lot of complex thinking at times in terms of how you can get somebody on board with this potentially very, very different outlook on a situation. I mean, this is we're asking at times we're going to be asking people to have a very, very radically different perspective on this. If we want to influence, eventually a larger community here. And so, yeah, I almost look at this group that we're potentially trying to form here is incubating networks of leaders and social engineers, as well as just about strictly around power. Like, we want to empower people to be leaders on this issue, leaders in their community. And I think it potentially could extend well beyond circumcision as well. I think that if that, through this type of networking and community building, and getting into the political arena, it's quickly going to expand way beyond circumcision as well. And that could potentially attract people in itself. And we do have to be careful about that eventually, because there's people who want power just, you know, not that they're going to be inherently nefarious about it, but um, it could they could have other goals as well, and they that aren't aligned with us, and they use this issue. I think eventually is going to be able to be weaponized in very negative ways as well. And I think there's other intactivist groups that are aware of this, actually, or people within intactivism and outside of intactivism that know what we have here, if you will. I mean, this is legitimately a extremely egregious atrocity, and it has violated our human rights. And there are groups affiliated with this, and it just can be used very potently, I think. So, not that I want to get lost in the weeds too much there, but that's something we'll discuss openly as a group as well. On we do need to be careful, I think, at times as well. And I think I just want to be open about that with the larger group and get other people's feedback and perspective, but not to say that we're going to shy away from difficult subject matter as well, particularly um, around what I consider the infantilization of the perps or the perpetrators on this issue, and there might be a middle ground. I'm obviously very radical in a lot of ways. And, I think eventually we might settle on a middle ground here. But I also think in some ways the existing intactivists that are infantilizing these groups, they themselves are very radical. Like, that always felt very radical to me, the way that they present the parents, and even at times that they present the physicians. Um, and I don't think they're hearing any of that feedback. I mean, they are from me a little bit, but there's a lot of men that I've come across that are mm, upset about that strategy and feel even personally offended by it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity that could come from collecting these disenfranchised voices together and presenting through a unified front here. So I'll leave it at that. I know I went on a long thing there, but it was a great question. I appreciate you asking that.
No, yeah, for sure. Um, I think, yeah, at the end there, you were kind of talking about the physicians or the parents and how like some existing activist
Mhm.
organizations think about that. And well, from a strategic perspective, I think I agree with you. And I think one thing that I find particularly interesting is I think a lot of the time when you try to convince someone of something, like that's kind of how I describe what you're saying the existing activist organizations are doing. It's like, oh, we don't want to upset them. If we upset them, they're going to shut down and not listen to us, or it's something to that effect is what they're thinking. I think you typically would whenever you try to convince someone like that, the only thing you do is you convince them the idea wasn't their own. Because it's kind of like you're proselytizing or you're really like going out trying to convince someone, like being so nice and catering to them. And I guess that does sometimes have its place. But I think typically when you do that, it's all that it does is make the person realize, hey, this person is like trying to tell me what to think, and most people inherently just resist that. So like I actually think number one, I think what you were kind of describing is like people like victims kind of don't like the frame because it feels like it removes accountability from the people that deserve accountability, and I think that's a very good way to think about it. I think another way to think about it is this is also how you get the most impassioned activists is I think often the best way to get someone to do what you want is to not make it clear you want them to do anything at all. And I think if you're being very transparent that, hey, doctor, hey, parent, I want you to not do this, I want you to change your mind, people are immediately very resistant to that. But if you are not giving them the time of day and you're saying, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I think you deserve accountability for what you do, and you can even be much more harsh than I just was. Like, you can say very harsh things in these circumstances. I think that actually, in some ways, plays better, as in, like, maybe you don't convince them in that moment, but that wasn't your goal. Your goal is to kind of say like, hey, we're on the right side. We know it. We're going to point it out, and we're going to point out that you're on the wrong side. And then people see that kind of like how other social justice issues work, where it's like, hey, people don't have a nice, calm conversation about, oh, the different studies and whatever about racism. People just point out someone, hey, you're a racist, and then they shame them and say, okay, you need to shut up or whatever, something to that effect. And I think that works very well because people see that and they're like, yeah, I want to join the people that are calling out the racists. I identify with that. So I think like actually being harsher is counterintuitively often a better strategy.
I think, yeah, I think that's, I think you're, what I would say off the cuff is that I think you're partially correct in that there are times and places for it, but then we also have to be cognizant of the fact that that, and I think we're in a very different position with this issue because, it's so conclusively an atrocity and there's no like wiggle room around it necessarily. But what we're seeing with racism or maybe race-based politics is there's a huge backfire right now among the rights, and they actually capitalized on that politically, I think, and that there was um it isn't having the same impact that it was previously, and people feel that it was um that their what people were saying was racism wasn't even racism to them and things like that. Or they didn't really feel it was that way. I mean, there's a lot to that discussion that I'm not very good at articulating in this exact moment, but it's having a very serious backfire right now. And that the people who were even calling people racist potentially were racist themselves in certain instances in a very systemic way and institutionalizing a sort of. So I don't think that maybe even that has, the point that I brought up has much merit in this particular discussion, but it is something to be careful about or something to keep in mind at the very least. But I don't know if we're going to encounter the same problem here because for me it's a lot more for the way that I see things uh it's a lot more absolute with this issue. We did have a surgery, or whatever you want to call it, a mutilation of our body. The evidence is right there. There's no wiggle room here. It's nothing's ambiguous, I guess. Nothing's left ambiguous. It's very, very um the flagrancy of it is really in your face and very obvious. So, um, yeah, I don't think we're gonna, I needed to talk through that, I guess, but yeah, I don't think we're gonna encounter the same situation here at all. Well, in some ways we are, in the sense that we can just tell people how it is. And in a way, whether, and there's a way to diplomatically shame somebody or, not even necessarily diplomatically, but in a way that is maybe not, it doesn't isn't super offensive, but it still gets the point across, and it still builds the mental model for people on, this, the group of people that think that this is permissible are completely in the wrong and have serious flaws in their moral, legal, logical, and ethical frameworks. So I think that, I, I think there's a lot of substance to what you said though, and it's not being leveraged by intactivists right now, I guess, to make a long story short.
No, yeah, I think that's a very interesting counterpoint. And yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. And I think you're definitely right. When you like go about this in that kind of way, like as like recent social justice movements have, you see backlash, right? I guess where I'm coming from is I'd rather get anywhere near that. I would love it if one political party championed this issue and the other one championed it in the other direction. I would find that to be a much better state of the world than the
We
one that
have
we're in
nothing to
today.
lose is the position we're in right now. We got nothing. It can't get any worse than this. Yeah, it can't get any worse than the position we're in. So we're in a great experimental stage here.
Right. You're definitely right though. We have to be careful about if doing that engineers opposition. But like right now, there's just nothing. Yeah, you're right. There's nothing to lose. So
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot to that. All right. Well, let's just keep moving on here to what I wanted to discuss next, which is, and we kind of got into this a little bit, and so maybe there isn't too much more we need to go over, but I'm finding there's a lot of individuals that are frustrated with the mainstream intactivist organizations, not necessarily even hostile or, they don't like them and they don't want them doing what they're doing, but maybe more that they're not finding their place in any of these organizations right now. They're not it's not connecting with them, it's not resonating with them, it's not the way that they want to pursue intactivism. And like you brought up many times, it's difficult to on ramp them into these organizations and get them really networked into these communities. So that's one thing that I'm pretty frustrated about with intactivism. And it's not necessarily even an inherent flaw of these intactivist groups. It's just that there isn't this community yet that I feel like I resonate with in any way. And so, yeah, that's partially the reason I want to create this organization and this community forefront, is it comes from my own personal pursuit of having this community that I can leverage and be a part of. But then also through that organization, you can exert your own influence on, at first maybe just the intactivism, but then also the larger conversation and the larger public square here. So, and I think we're still in the early stages of it. Obviously intactivism has been around for a long time here, but it doesn't have the mainstream appeal by any means yet. It's this very fringe. So I think whoever gets, there's some truth to this. There's a huge opportunity for this, like to capture the initial audience still and shape them in a certain way. So, and I think there's going to be a lot of different perspectives that people are going to have, and intactivist organizations that certain people will resonate more with others. But um, there could be a situation where an intactivist organization is capturing a larger and larger audience, and that's a good problem to have in some ways, but it's not really the messaging that we want to be putting out. And so I think we've already been shaped in a lot of ways. The reason that intactivism mm, maybe presents things in such an infantilized way at times is because of the early initial engineers of intactivism. And what their messaging was and the way that they pursued things, I think, had a very significant influence downstream on how everyone else looked at this issue. And if we had people just firing off the hip right from the beginning, it could look a lot different. And it could be in a negative way or a positive way. Could have been, the way that this all was presented, is that was actually highly advantageous for to be in the situation that we're in now. It could have been more destructive maybe at first, or never got off the ground if people were too hostile in the beginning. Who knows? But I think it's always in a state of flux, and I think we're in a very different position now than we were 50 years ago or 40 years ago.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think as you said, we're kind of trying to shape that vision here. And I think we're also kind of identifying that there's maybe a hole in the market right now, or as in there is kind of no or very limited consistent content in this sphere. And definitely none kind of with the slants that we're coming at least the slant we're coming at it from in this moment. So I think we're trying to, in some ways, shape that. And I think, yeah, like you said, Carter, we're trying to be pretty transparent about that. And then also, I guess from our perspective, it's interesting as well because to me, at least, it somewhat feels like I know about the next big thing before it happens. Like I know about Amazon before it got big, or I know about the next big social justice issue before it got big. And when exactly this is going to get big, I don't know. But it feels really an interesting time to be a part of it. As in like me and you and I even want the audience, we can like position ourselves as like the initial community or the initial content creators or whatever it is. And I think there's going to be a lot of potential for growth there, like you said, and capturing a big audience, especially if this issue starts to become more popular, even a little bit. And I think like everyone watching now, I think this is a great opportunity. It's obviously a very hard issue to engage with, but I think this is an opportunity for everyone that's here already. Like you were able to kind of discover something early, and that's kind of what everyone's trying to do in the stock market or in anything. So like, it's obviously very difficult to engage with this issue, and it's not going to take away from what was done to you or to anyone. But it is interesting that like, hey, you kind of found yourself in a very interesting position here. You've done something that everyone wants to do and kind of can't, is like been early to something before it's going to go big. So I kind of want to like help people be a part of that now and help it grow based on that.
Yeah, I love that. I think finding any way we can maybe incentivize people to get involved and get on board with this. Um, and I think right now it is not intactivism as a whole is not appeal is in terms of actually getting involved and getting shit done and networking with people, it's not very attractive to a lot of men at all right now. And it's actually the complete opposite for a lot of men, where they're almost repulsed by it in some ways. So yeah, finding ways to attract people into this. And I think you brought up an interesting point. Obviously, we want to criminalize this and police it even, but the shorter term incentives for people maybe look a lot different than the longer term incentives for them. And we just need to get the ball rolling here. So I think there is this dimension of your own personal grief. There's this dimension of um, ending it for children, but there's also this dimension like we have identified something absolutely profound here. We are looking to radically change the world in a lot of ways. I mean, this is I believe a night and day difference for the human race. If we could abandon, criminalize, and police juvenile genital mutilation around the world, I think we would have done it would be totally game changing, and we would have achieved one of the greatest human pursuits ever, actually, ever in existence, is the abandonment, criminalization, and policing of widespread genital mutilation of juveniles, I guess, in mass, right? The in mass genital mutilation, hundreds of millions. Um, or obviously it's billions, but I was saying in this period of time, but it's it's thousands, tens of thousands every day. I mean, it's possible. It's insane numbers, actually. If we actually started counting, it's 2 to 3,000 in the United States alone. So when we're looking at the whole world here, this is I mean, what's more important of an issue, really, when we really break it? Obviously, there's people dying and things like that, but 10,000 plus, and if we really did the math, it might be more than that, juveniles a day being genitally mutilated, a lot of them in the neonatal stage. I mean, what if we had, those numbers of rape and things like that? I mean, or other types of physical harm. This is egregious physical harm on juveniles that's happening in mass. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think getting involved, if you're somebody who pursues social justice issues, this possibly should be the one at the very top of your list here. And if you get satisfaction about healing the world and socially engineering the world in a way that's much more moral, ethical, and logical, then I think this is definitely something to have on your radar, the intactivism and this pursuit. And I think some people are really driven by that. And I certainly partially am driven by that. Like, I'm very sensitive to the state of the world and the state of my nation and the state, no pun, of my actual state and my city and my local town and my community. And I think there's a lot of people that are sensitive to that. And so this could be something to get involved in for that reason alone, is that it's a totally game-changing social issue, and we're going to radically change the world through the abandonment, criminalization, and policing of this practice.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I agree. I'm unfortunately
Right,
losing the
right.
room here, and I do have to leave soon.
Okay.
I just wanted to leave you guys. So, like, I might have to shut off my camera and run. So, if you wanted to have any closing thoughts after me, you could definitely
Sure.
do
Makes
that. I
sense.
think just one thing I wanted to call out. Yeah, this was awesome chatting with you, Carter. I think we should do it again, and maybe do a longer one next time. Also, for people watching, I think I don't know. I'm not usually a YouTuber, but I guess like, comment, and subscribe if this resonated with
Yeah.
you in any way. I've heard that helps a lot. So I think that's how I'm going to close it out. Carter, I'll hand it over to you, and unfortunately going to need to shut my camera off for a
No
moment.
worries. Sounds good, Jack. Yeah, we'll catch up again later, and I'd love to shoot another one next week. Just keep the ball rolling here. Okay, take care. Well, that's where I'm going to conclude it as well. And we'll look forward to checking out the comments and shooting a video next week.
Cool. I'm gonna
Oh,
take it into the outside room here, and I can just chat with you after here, just to
okay, for
get your
just a
thoughts
little
on how
bit.
it went.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah.